How's it going, everyone? Aldrin Estacio here with FlytPath.com. Now, Insta360 comes out with yet another camera. They've been on fire this year, coming out with a bunch of new cameras, including this one right here, which is their most recent one. This is the 1-inch mod that goes onto the 1RS camera. We now have the updated X3, which is the next version of this one right here, which if you guys are familiar with my channel, the X2 is my favorite 360 camera. And I know we'll have to go into more detail talking about each one of these, what makes them all different, because I know it's kind of confusing. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel because I will be having separate videos going into more details about what the differences are. And after using this camera for the past couple weeks now, of course, there's a bunch of camera specs that have been updated. We'll talk about that. But more importantly, I want to talk about some of those main features I felt that have really been enhanced after using these two right here. So to start off, let's just quickly go through the camera specs on the updated X3. And we'll first talk about sensor size, a nice bump up. We do have a 1/2-inch sensor on the new X3, a nice little jump from the previous X2, which had a 1/2.3-inch CMOS sensor. When it comes to video resolution, we are still at that 5.7K resolution. However, with the X3, one of the new features that they're going to be offering is full active HDR in 5.7. When it comes to photo resolution, there is a new 72 megapixel 360 photo option on the X3. And we now have a slightly wider aperture compared to the X2. This is an aperture of an f1.9. The X2 had an aperture of an f2.0. And when it comes to weather and waterproofing, we have the same depth rating as the X2. You can bring this into the water up to 10 meters. As far as some of the other camera features, we do have time lapse, which now shoots in 8K compared to 5K on the previous model. And when it comes to different options, as far as shooting modes go, we of course have video, HDR video, we have time lapse, time shift, bullet time, loop recording, star lapse, burst, interval shooting, HDR photo, as well as photo mode. Now, of course, the number one feature of shooting and having a 360 camera, if you guys aren't familiar with it, is that you have these dual lenses right here, one on each side. And when you hit record and you're shooting in 360, you are shooting everything around you. So you know you're never gonna miss a shot, especially when this is pointed out just like that. You're able to shoot everything around the camera, as well as the camera lenses are actually pointed back towards you. You get to actually shoot yourself as well. With this type of camera, you don't necessarily have to perfectly frame it every time. You're shooting everything, and then all you have to do is go back into the Insta360 app. And now, since it did shoot everything, you can actually reposition the frame and capture and export out specific clips from that 360 footage, and not necessarily having to focus on, say, the back of an action camera, making sure you're within that frame here. You just put it near them and it'll shoot everything. Now, note, one of the things that discourages people from shooting 360 is the fact that, yes, it is shooting everything. However, it does take more work in post-processing because you have to reframe it. So if you are the type that just wants something straight out of camera and you just want to be able to just take that footage and start using it, they do have a single mode option, a single lens mode option here that we'll talk about. However, if you are shooting 360, just note that that's the extra step you'll need to take, that reframing, which you'll either do on the phone or on the desktop app. My next favorite feature on this thing is the invisible selfie stick, which of course, that's what they've marketed since the very beginning. But if you aren't familiar with it, basically the way the lenses are positioned here and the way that the stitch is happening, it makes it look like the stick, this right here, is not in the shot. So they call it the invisible selfie stick. That way, if you're out there vlogging or this is attached to your car or bike, that way you don't see the stick. Yeah, you might see it in the shadows depending on which direction the sun's coming at, but for the most part, it just looks like this camera is floating right above your subject. The one new feature I really like on the X3, and this is kind of goes back to the whole 360 thing, if you don't want to shoot 360, you are able to shoot in single lens mode. On the X2, we were only able to shoot 1440 on the single lens. We can now shoot 4K single lens on the X3. Also, as far as audio test goes, how does the audio sound? I'm about 1.5 feet away from my mouth to the camera, so how does the audio sound? Got the street going here. And for my next favorite feature of the camera, that 2.29-inch touchscreen, a huge difference compared to the previous 360 cameras. And that small screen really made it kind of tricky to not only see because the text was really small, but navigate when you're swiping down, swiping across, and trying to just preview your video here. To be honest with you, whenever I would use this camera, I would almost never preview my footage after I shot. Almost every time I go out shooting with the X3 now, because of that large screen, I'm now able to preview all of my shots. I'm easily able to navigate the 360 footage. I had a couple people use this camera for the very first time. They've never used a 360 camera. They were able to just put this out, go through the pump track, and when they were done, we quickly went back to the footage. We were able to see on that large touch screen all of the shots and make sure especially that we were able to compose them and get them in it. That's something, like I said, I didn't really do with the X2 because that screen is just way too small. Now, when I was out there shooting the skateboarders, I did want to try this new feature on here, which is called the Me mode. Now, when you're using Me mode, basically this is another thing that also helps you cut down on editing time, which I said is more of the crutch, I would say, with 360 is more of the fact that you have to do a little bit more editing. Now, what Me mode does is that it automatically frames that subject. So if I'm holding the camera just like this, it'll automatically frame me and shoot with those two lenses. It'll automatically capture me whichever way I'm pointing the camera. The one thing I would have liked from Insta360 is the ability to have both formats, the 9x16 and 60x9, already in something like an MPEG-4 and MOV file format. That way you'd be able to take the file directly from the card straight into your editing program, but you still have to take it into Insta360 Studio and then re-export it back out. Now, the one thing that's really great about the Insta360 camera, and actually a lot of their other cameras, is the flow state stabilization. Now, speaking of stabilization, when you're talking about action cameras, you have things like Hyper Smooth on the GoPro, you have Rocksteady on the DJI Osmo Action. Here we have flow state stabilization. And they also have horizon lock. So whichever way you're pointing your camera, you can actually maintain a level horizon with horizon lock on the X3. Next new feature we have on here is something that I don't use as much because on the previous cameras, you had to go into a lower resolution to get a higher frame rate. But now if you wanted to get those Matrix style shots where you spin it above your head, you can now shoot in 4K at 120 frames a second. The one thing I do like about the X3 is that they kept the form factor pretty much the same as the X2. As you can see side by side, it is just a little bit thicker than the X2. Definitely a lot thinner than the 1-inch mod right here, but it is very, very similar to the X2. So if you already have an X2, you just know that the form factor is pretty much the same. It is just a little bit thicker there to, of course, accommodate the larger camera sensor and that bigger screen. One thing I do like about Insta360 is that they always have a ton of accessories to choose from for you to get that perfect shot. For instance, this is a backpack mount. So I never thought about using a backpack mount, but basically if you have a backpack on, all you do is strap this onto the back of the bag, and then you can adjust this right here. And this will now allow you to get that behind the back shot where it looks like someone is actually following you with a drone. When I was in Chicago, I was using this one a ton. This is a 9-foot carbon fiber extension pole. And this thing just keeps on going and keeps on going. And with these types of shots, if you do some rise shots, I was in Chicago shooting the Bean and I was able to go through the trees. So I was able to use this for a lot of behind the scenes work. So while I'm setting up my drone, I'll just put this on the table, extend this thing all the way out. Because like I said, it does have that built-in tripod, that screen, as well as a sensor upgrade to a 1/2 inch, all of the other camera specs to go along with it, and all those new features. Definitely a nice upgrade on the X3. I'm of course gonna have some upcoming videos comparing the X2 versus the X3. Also, what is the difference with this 1-inch sensor compared to the 1/2 inch? Can you really see the difference? If you guys want to see some of these videos, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Now, as far as pricing goes, I will be leaving the current prices as far as when I'm shooting this video. I'll leave the current prices of these cameras here on screen. But of course, if you guys want the most updated prices, or if you guys are looking at picking up one of these cameras, all the links will be down below in the video description. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. This is Lorenzo with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.